All right. Welcome to Shelf Help. Today we're speaking with Gabriel González, co-founder, co-CEO of Casalú, Latin-inspired rum-based seltzer brand that's scaling pretty rapidly in big name retailers like Walmart, like Whole Foods, Walmart, etc. Founded by three South American immigrants, Gabriel and team are pretty dead set on building the Red Bull of Latino culture, which we're definitely going to dive into, but really just a brand that shows up in all the main places that, surrounds culture, music, fashion, sports, not just on the shelf. So building something really cool. Excited to get into it. First off, Gabriel, just for listeners that aren't that familiar with Casalú, just give us kind of quick lay of the land, just in terms of kind of the origin story, why behind the brand, or products in the lineup, and then maybe just throw out a few places that people can get their hands on them, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Adam, thank you. Look, Casalú is a representation of our culture. We felt that our culture was at a place where we as kids lived it with Black culture, where we were becoming pop culture, right? I grew up with Kanye, with Jay, with MTV, NBA, like really leading what was going on in terms of global culture. And now kids are growing up to Bad Bunny and Lionel Messi at the MLS. And what you see there is just a clear cultural evolution of Latin culture just being beyond just Latinos for Latinos, but Latinos for the world. And we saw that, and we really believe we needed a brand that represented us. In parallel to that, and the reason why we are in this category is because my co-founder and I, we love beer moments, and I love beer, but he didn't. He was always the guy who would not necessarily drink beer and wasn't the biggest fan. And he said, look, I love beer moments. I just wish I had something that tasted slightly different for me personally. And that was at the moment where we were seeing the rise of High Noon, White Claw during the pandemic. And he said, why isn't there one made for Latinos or with Latin culture at its core? And why isn't there one made with rum? And we are Venezuelans, and we grew up with rum, really. And we saw that not only in Venezuela and the Caribbean, but if you really think about it, from Mexico down to Argentina, rum has a strong presence throughout Central America and South America. And it really clicked for us that we could create something at the intersection of Latin culture and our consumer habits that were shifting, that was authentic, and that could really capture our generation. And that's where our name comes from. Casa, it's our home, it's our heritage, and Salud, which is an open door to share Latin culture with everybody. And that's what we want to do in this category, which we feel is massively underserves Latinos. And despite that, we see an amazing opportunity, and we are building it ourselves.
Thinking back to the early days of formulation and R&D for a minute, imagine like most product development journeys, it took a while to dial things in, find the formulation process that worked. And kind of curious, without giving away too many secrets, what were some of those key variables you played around with, or kind of two key tweaks you made along the way, that between that first version you made to the final version where you guys all said, yeah, this is right, we feel great about bringing this to market?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the early days, it all started in the summer of 2020, actually. And it started with my co-founder with that question of fundamentally how to think about a seltzer or a rum seltzer that was for ourselves. And there were a couple key constraints, to build the box where we were going to build the product. And the first one was we wanted it to have dark aged rum. And back home in Venezuela, for you to be able to call something rum, it has to be aged 2 years. So we were already starting with a high quality base for the drink, and fundamentally was water, juice, and a little bit of agave syrup. And we started simply with a lemon lime concoction. And from a soda stream, which is where it all started in the kitchen, it evolved to a keg, and then it evolved to working with a partner that could help us develop a industrial level formula. And it hasn't stopped. Like that early R&D has evolved all the way from that initial flavor profile that we created to insights that have taken us to the flavors that we have right now, which we have 4 flavors in the market 3 years later. And we can dig into it, but that's sort of the context in the early days. And we started, none of us came from alcohol or beverage or honestly CPG. We were fully ignorant of what we were getting into, which most likely it was a blessing, because if we had known, maybe we would have avoided it, and we just went full on. No route to market, really knowledge of what we were doing except for knocking on doors and seeing the response of the people and of the retailers that we were able to get into. And so then it became, and it evolved to landing a distributor. It's called Breakthrough out in South Florida, or well, actually covers all of Florida for us, and getting into Total Wine towards the evolution from going from one flavor to two flavors to four, and a lot of pitfalls and learnings throughout that journey over the past 3 years.
In terms of commercialization, scaling up manufacturing and co-packers, assuming you guys aren't still making this in your kitchen, but
Yeah.
kind of at what point during that formulation process did you guys start engaging with co-packers, and how'd you guys kind of go about finding a beverage co-packer that you felt like was going to be the right one for you guys?
So it starts with what we knew. And so when we went from the kitchen to a keg, which is what allowed us to test it in the market, we took it to Miami. It was us, the founders, sleeping in the same bed horizontally, because we had moved from different parts of the US, to give it out to people for them to try it, get feedback, and it helped us tweak the initial formula accordingly. We then said, okay, we have a real shot. We were lucky to be able to raise a little bit of money, because none of us came from the background or had capital that we could invest, being immigrant, the three of us. And that initial seed capital was used towards finding those partners and trying to learn who could help us create the formula. We worked with some people that claimed things that could be delivered, and they were not at all. So we learned that pretty quickly, and we started with a co-packing facility, a small distillery called Siami in Hollywood, Florida, because one of the things we knew is that we wanted to launch in South Florida, in Miami. And the reason we wanted to do that, besides the obvious of the Caribbean and Hispanic highly dense population, was that the bet that we took was about, this is probably the hardest market we could ever go. Why? If you're going down 95, you're going to see Absolute Vodka marketing in Spanish. Like, everybody's trying to go towards this consumer,
Right.
where it's evidently not a separate white space that you can get into. It's just simply like, who can capture this consumer? If we can do that, then I think we have a really strong foundation then to go elsewhere, where we think we can even have more appeal across the US, and be able to capture that consumer, because the foundation has already been built. So knowing that, we chose this distillery in Hollywood. They were great to work with and make our first initial products. And then we've grown from that to now we use a co-packing facility in the west side of the state that better fits our capacity and demand. And eventually from that, I guess, we'll keep growing and probably use a couple throughout the country.
Yeah. When you're searching for those co-packers, having conversations with them, was it hard to find one that was willing to take a chance on an upstart brand?
No, absolutely. And surprisingly to a lot of people, Florida doesn't necessarily have too many established high level, call it, co-packers that may work with smaller MOQs, as
Yeah.
can be seen in other parts of the country. And that made a challenge, because it basically meant you either work with a brewery at a smaller level or a small distillery, or you try to go to these higher requirement co-packers. And there really wasn't anything in the middle, let's call it, to professionalize that ramp up. So we ended up deciding to go with the smaller distillery that, through conversations, was simply open to doing it. And they had a mobile canning facility. They were starting to do this. So there was a lot of learning through it. Luckily, that initial formula that we had was bulletproof for those conditions, but it's not always the case.
Sure.
So it's definitely something for founders to be careful with.
Any recommendations you might have for some up and coming beverage founders that are just kind of starting that process of searching for the right co-packer and
Yeah,
one down?
totally. I think we all focus on who can make my thing for the cheapest and the fastest. And I can't emphasize how much quality assurance is important, because having a product that goes bad out in the market could most certainly kill the company for any potential capital that you have. So I think understanding the variables that go into your drink, specifically if we talk about drinks. So for example, juices could get fermented based on their pH or bricks, and what are the variables that really go into the drink, and
Yeah.
how could they get affected by the conditions where they get created. And because we had it happen to us, we had a passion fruit SKU that fermented, and because it was made in a beer facility, and those two just didn't go hand in hand, even after being pasteurized, even after us trying, like, what if we put preservatives, like, even after trying that, it just didn't came out to be what we expected it to be, and we had to pivot from that product. And I think understanding the variables is the homework that needs to get done. And if you can produce the least amount possible, just to see how it's taken by the market, and also how the product functions, whether it breaks or not, optimize for that, even if it's a little bit more expensive, because in the long run, can pay off.
I guess double click on that, because I was going to ask you about that passion fruit SKU, which I think you mentioned like quickly became a hero SKU, but then also quickly became started having formulation production challenges. Like, is there, I guess, yeah, maybe looking back now, any like big things you would have done differently in regards to kind of rolling out this passion fruit SKU in terms of the formulation and kind of R&D process? Now looking back,
Yeah, I think it was a very tough one to catch, because we caught it after it was in the market, and we talked to a lot of professionals, and everybody was like, I don't know how this happened, but we did work with Boyle Brands. Shout out to the Boyle team, pretty famous in the CPG space, to help us take a look at the challenge, because it wasn't evident. And they were the ones who helped us find, like, this SKU simply cannot be produced in a place where there's beer, because yeast will fly no matter how clean the tank is, and eventually get into it. And if it's not properly mixed, which is already challenging, you guys fundamentally created a unicorn of a product, and those two just don't go together.
makes
And
sense.
if you want to make this in the same way, you're going to have to find a facility that does not touch beer.
Yeah.
If we think about advice, right, it would be, there are three that really come to mind. So the first one is use a third party to validate or to check. Maybe you'll get an answer, maybe you won't, but at least you give yourself a chance to catching something before producing it. Number two, make it in the least amount possible so you can see if it will really basically move as fast in the market. Luckily, we knew that this was harmless for the consumer, so there weren't safety concerns. It was more about, basically was turning into kombucha. And it's like, hey, I bought an RTD, a rum RTD. I didn't buy kombucha, right? Like, it's just a different product. So and I've heard a lot of different founders go through the same thing. We weren't the only ones. And this specific one would be careful if you're making something with juice. Do not go full on in a beer making facility, because it may get affected, and be careful with it, and do your homework before you decide to do it, and take all the safety precautions you can.
Totally. That's really helpful. Well, on the bright side of me, right before we jumped on here, press record, I was asking you about what you guys are doing with Art Basel, and you're telling me how you got so much inbound interest, and like even you guys got an inbound interest from Nike, and you got this like a partnership where the Blue logo is sitting right next to Nike, which is amazing at the stage you guys are at. So in terms of kind of brand identity and packaging design, first off, just in terms of thinking back to those early days, what were some of the key things that are kind of top of mind for you when you guys were building out the brand identity, positioning, and voice for Casalú?
Look, I think it is since day one. I think when we started this podcast, right? And you hit a note on it. Our goal has always been to be what Red Bull was to extreme athlete culture, extreme sports. We wanted to be for the young Latino generation. So what we meant by that was, okay, how do we express the way we are as founders, especially Ricardo and I? I'm very big into music. He's very big into fashion. Like, we can tell you the next Bad Bunny 10 years ahead of it, just because we live in there. How do we build a brand that resonates with that generation? The ones that are pushing culture forward, the one that is really looking to make their mark. And since the beginning, even with the name, we said, look at Red Bull, right? Like, Red Bull, if I ask you, you might tell me it's an energy drink. If I ask someone else, they might tell you it's an F1 team. The beauty of it is, can we have a name that resonates with, Casalú Football Club, Casalú Productions? Like, does it stand with the ethos of, very clearly, what we're doing here is elevating Latino culture. So we work with Latino creators, Latino talent. We give them a platform for them to create. And I think that in the beginning resonated a lot. Every time we've engaged with Latinos that we think have a lot of talent, we simply ask them, hey, what would you want to do? What do you dream of that no other brand would take a bet on? And that just opens their brain completely to be like, hey, we could do something, and culturally it resonates. So I'll give you an example. Our passion fruit was going bad. One of our investors, Tom Baker, founder of Mr. Black, was like, you just need to kill it. And that was his advice. So we said, okay, let's do a funeral. And what we did was we worked with actors and writers that we knew they're really good, they're really famous sketch personalities on TikTok and Instagram. We said, instead of us bringing passion fruit to your sketches, TikToks, etc., to basically publicize that these SKU is no longer around and we have new ones coming, how about we let you write for an imaginary character and you guys act, and we'll build a production around that to tell the story that passion fruit is dead, but we're going to cry him out and then new flavors are coming. Which for a lot of people would be ridiculous because you're basically making an advertisement for a product that is no longer around, that was your top selling product. And we did it. And just the impact that it's had from the respect, the level of respect there is for Casalú, which is like, oh my God, like you guys did something that no brand would think of doing. And you did it all surrounded by 100% Latino talent, producer, actor, writers, and yourselves as a brand. It just like completely changes the level of respect that they have for Casalú as a brand, or the world has for Casalú as a brand. And you know, even getting for that piece of content, which is not typical. Doing that repeatedly and thinking that way repeatedly since we were very early, it's what has put us in the map to get the respect of other big brands to say, okay, yeah, you're the company I would like to work with because I like how you think, and I know you're just pushing the boundaries.
From the visual identity, packaging design standpoint, how you wanted to actually convey this from a visual standpoint, like what was top of mind for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you the early drawings. Luckily, it was an amazing experience because we worked with a friend of ours from college actually to build our packaging and the design of the cans, directed by, with all the creative direction from Ricardo, my co-founder. And the takeaway was, the exercise was, we were working with a friend from North Carolina who, you know, we would be describing designs and we would be like, hey, this needs a little bit more of Bad Bunny on this side. And that's how we would communicate. And then that forced us to like, oh my God, no one's going to understand that. Like, we need to translate what we're trying to say. And how does that look visually? And that was such a challenge in the beginning. It was the most useful exercise for brand creation that we could have gotten because it helped us be more specific about what we were looking at. So if you look at the can, we can go there all day long because it all starts with the gold top, the topper, for example. And for us, that was an homage to vintage Hispanic beers on one side. And on the other side, it was, if you have a celebration, an older person in the group, the grandpa, el abuelo, might have like a gold watch or some kind of bling that represents the heritage of that family. And it was like, okay, cool, that has to be part of our branding. The arch in the front, it's a window, it's a door opening towards Latin culture. The texture on the back is the same as a fabric of your grandma's, sort of where you eat the tablecloth. The palm trees are just an homage to a tropical feeling that it was, you know, it all started because in college I went to a party, and this is in the back of the can. This is the story that's in the back of the can. I go to a party in early 2012. I was just an immigrant coming from Venezuela, and a friend comes to me and says, hey, are you feeling tropical yet? Ya estás tropical. And what that meant was like, oh my God, like I'm in Boston, so far away from my family and from everything that I've known, but I'm in the right moment and with the people I need to be at. And that's a big part of Latin culture. It's like we find our way to enjoy no matter how far away we are from home. And we always find an excuse to celebrate the moment. And I turned that into a playlist that I call Tropicalation. And then years later, when Ricardo made the first concoction of Casalú, he was calling it that, Tropicalation. And I was like, this is such a, like, it's not only through music, it's not only through a moment, like there are other ways of sharing this feeling. And that's the feeling we are trying to communicate. Just like Red Bull communicates adrenaline, like this is a feeling, this core part of Latin culture. This is what we're trying to communicate. This is what we're trying to make everybody feel. And that's what Casalú is all about. So that's been part of the brand since the beginning.
From a go-to-market standpoint, especially these days, which is how like busy the world is, how many different types of companies and businesses are vying for consumers' attention, how easily people get distracted these days. What did you guys kind of find was most effective in terms of capturing the market's attention and securing kind of a place in people's minds in the early days when the brand was virtually unknown?
Yeah, we were lucky of launching in Miami. In a sense, that helped us a ton because we moved to the city, and it's funny. It was the co-founders living all in the same apartment with our loved ones. I was married at the time, still am, now with a kid. And gladly, our significant others support us. Um, we got roped into the music industry pretty quickly. And what that meant was a lot of the right people trying the product very early on. Within 3 months of launching the brand, you would have Fade drinking it, top 10 stream artist in the world, Tiny, the most important producer in the history of Latin music, Raul Alejandro, top 5 artists in the world. So that happened very, very fast. And that doesn't translate necessarily into sales. And I think that's something that other founders just got to be careful, right? Like not chasing the shiny object. We did not search this or try to get this by design, but it led to what helped us a ton, which was events and like concerts, for example, where we absolutely crush. Like, I don't think we've ever been beaten in the category if we've decided to do a Latin concert. Um, and just a couple weeks ago, we did Quevedo, which he's a Spanish singer, and we absolutely blew any other category out of the water just because it clicks and is having the right product at the right moment. And it's all about those two things together. Early in the day, I think that paid off because we were just planting seeds in what would lead to the right moment of consumption.
Yeah.
And that's how we went about it in the beginning. Obviously, doing in store tastings and other initiatives, but primarily I attribute a lot to that. We also, going back to the point of who we are as a brand, about giving chances to people or serving as a platform where we can collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you about those actors who wrote the piece for the Maracuya advertisement we did recently. But if you look 2 years earlier, we were the first brand they ever worked with. So we were the first brand deal, if you can call it that way, very cheap for us to do it. But there's a famous Y Combinator line that maybe you don't remember all of your investors, but you definitely remember the first one. And being first at supporting up and coming talent, if you can stay in the game long enough, it really pays off. So we were doing a lot of Instagram content with that group and had their loyalty, and they now turn down deals that are 5 times bigger than we are just because we were the first ones who took a bet on them. And that's really paid off. So working with content has really been a differentiator for us, and being in music is a key aspect as well.
Pretty sure you guys broke into the market through self-managed distribution, partnering with a 3PL that had just a liquor permit, which I think I've heard you say was a terrible way to go about it. Tell me a bit about why that was so terrible, and
Look,
maybe why you
yeah.
avoid.
For us, horrible. I would, if you are at least an RTD founder listening to this, alcohol is different to traditional CPG, so take it with a grain of salt. For us specifically, for Casalú, choosing a 3PL was a terrible decision. We also, to be frank, we looked smart because we were doing it consciously, but we didn't necessarily have an alternative on the table. So why was it terrible? Because the way it worked is there were fixed monthly fees we needed to pay, and then the retailers. So if you think about a gas station or an open market like Miami, where as long as you're under 6%, you qualify under beer or wine and beer licenses, which means you can sell to anybody, pretty much, that sells alcohol. And we would try to sell them, and then normally they would not have an account registered with that third-party logistics company. And that would mean we would open that account for them. We're already paying a monthly fee, but then we needed to do the sale and we needed to pick up the check. And if that check is not picked up quickly enough, they get listed, which means they can't receive alcohol from anybody else. So we were on the hook for making our clients lose clients in a 3 people team. And that was like such a dumb decision. Hindsight 2020, we didn't necessarily have an alternative. Just not a fit. If you're in a more like craft product that you can take your time, super high margin, low velocity necessarily, like maybe that's a better choice. But for us, it didn't make sense. When we switched to breakthrough, then it became a much easier game, because normally, as long as they're selling wine, breakthrough is typically a wine distributor, would normally have an account in the mainstream market. However, what we found, and here's the lesson 2 years into the market that I would give to we found 2 years into the market that I would give to other founders. Not that we did not try this, but for us selling to Latinos as our core initial demographic, well, the density of stores and accounts in Latino neighborhoods are dominated by beer players. So that would be the right choice if I look back, at least for us, because of that reason, where we are not necessarily opening new accounts for our distributor. We are just going to the ones that you already have and proving that we can sell there. And so we've gone from definitely not do it to preferably not do it to then, in the future, we're looking more at the beer network as a way to scale because that's the right approach for us specifically and is what we plan on doing. And that's just something to understand. And again, if you look at the beer network, for example, for RTD players, if you look at who's succeeding, Harbly, Surfside, like they all play that game. They've done it right. They've chosen the right approach or switched to the right approach early on because they're used to low margin, high volume. And so aligning incentives is very important if you're going into food and bev, especially if you're using a distributor.
Fast forward a bit, I think you guys now you've locked down shelf space at some pretty big name retailers, Whole Foods, Walmart, Total Wine. What have you guys found are some of the kind of core tools, tactics you found that have the most impact in terms of driving velocity across those doors you're in thus far? And these could be like, demos that
Yeah.
you got running, shelf talkers, IO violators, like innovative promo strategy, merchandising, maybe just big music partnerships that are driving traffic. Yeah. Like what have you found has the
Look, I
most
think
velocities? Yeah.
absolutely. I think the key, it all starts with the basics, right? So if you think about succeeding, at least from our perspective, is I tried something, I liked it. Where can I find it? Where can I buy it? Do I ever go to that store? And sure, there's discovery happening in the stores, but ideally you're educating a consumer that already goes to a store where they can find your product.
Right.
And the rest then is converting someone who was already going to go somewhere for a different product. Now, you hear me say product. That is the evolution of what we've seen. We've listened to our customer for a long time, and I think we were stubborn as to what we wanted to create. But if you think about fundamentally the hypothesis of why Casalú exists as a product is, if you look at the American mainstream market, it started with sparkling waters. Your LaCroix, your Spindrifts. Then, Mark Anthony Brands was genius enough to say, hey, let's add some alcohol to it. White Claw was born. And then Heineken said, look, we can make a higher quality product. Let's put actual liquor into it. And a whole market was created. If you look at the Latino, the problem is from beer to sparkling waters, that never really happened.
Hmm.
And so the evolution has been different. I think in the beginning, our hypothesis was about let's do a sparkling water with rum and that, that'll be consumed because it's a normal progression from your rum and Coke to your rum and sparkling water and lime. But it wasn't enough. They were looking really for an innovative product that could combine what they enjoy from low calorie with what they already drink, different teas, different types of cocktails, but in a format that was easy to consume, full flavor, and just convenient. And I think that brings us to, okay, where does that product make sense? And for us, when we look at those retailers that you were mentioning, we are seeing different levels of traction in different chains. Extremely surprised about how we are performing in Whole Foods as our brand being built right now there. Complete surprise. I would say I was ignorant to the possibility that it would work for us. And sort of a new thing. But from a strategy perspective has been, okay, where does our consumer who shops here, where do they go? Where are the areas that they attend? How do we educate their mass market samplings, which are those concerts basically, and then being present, readily available and visible in those stores. So your shelf talkers, your stacks, your different assets that educate are very important. I think the last piece to that is we previously had a package that was beautiful, sort of low key, and it just was not explicit enough and it would get lost on the shelf. Very dark, hidden, talking specifically about the box that we used to have. So we changed from green to pink, light pink to make it stand out with very explicit call out of what's the drink, what's in this box, and sort of the key call outs for who's looking for that, low alcohol, low sugar, low carb. And that's accelerated our velocity. And those have all been learnings from being in the market. And I engaged with a very sophisticated, amazing investor in the CPG world. And he said, this is a war of attrition. So stay long enough in the business and learn long enough and move fast to put those learnings into action. and those are typically the people who win.
Yeah. It's a 10-year marathon is what I hear a
Right,
lot.
right.
Another retailer, which I thought I'd touch on, Walmart is the
Yeah.
biggest retailer out there. Tell me a bit about just the journey of actually getting on shelf there in terms of just getting that buyer meeting, getting the commitment. And then once you got the yes, like all those kind of steps leading up to actually getting on shelf and having a successful launch.
Look, I really think that Walmart has changed a lot in terms of, I think for my early generation, Target was like the cool, hip place to find stuff. And for Gen Z, it's definitely Walmart. My sincerest, I have so much respect for Walmart after going there. The way it happened is we signed up to this platform called Range Me, which
Okay.
I definitely recommend, and we applied for the golden ticket open call. And open call is fundamentally once a year bringing products that are made in America to Arkansas, and the flight event Bentonville if you get selected, and then thousands of applications, 400 get to go, and then out of those 400, 40 or 50 get a golden ticket, which is an opportunity to sell in Walmart. Lucky enough, last year we got the opportunity to go, and it's insane. I mean, for someone like me, I remember when I was a kid and I visited the US, I used to buy my jackets and my toys at Walmart, and then being there is such a full circle moment. And you have a few minutes to pitch a buyer, and then they'll decide right there whether you're in or not. And we did that, and we got our golden ticket, test specifically for us what's called a license to hunt, which is a permission to go and pitch the stores for them to bring you in as a way to test whether Casalú would work in their retailers in certain areas. And then from there, you get to pitch again and see if you can expand, whether it's regionally or statewide or multi-state. For us, that is a process that took about a year from the yes to actually being activated to sell in the store. So we've recently deployed in a few stores in the South Florida area, and right now it's holiday season, so we're gonna see the results of that. But I can't say enough about how amazing. Really, I just have nothing but respect to it after talking to the guys at Athletic Brewing and other brands that were really built in Walmart or scaled up in Walmart is pretty cool, because you would think about that as the last step you take. And that may not be the case for everybody. I really have seen and saw some founders in the open call that clearly could do an amazing job in Walmart, and it could be the retailer where they build a brand. So for Casalú, I think it's a great place to get in front of specifically our audience or our Latino consumer in the Florida.
I think you kind of touched on this in the context of Whole Foods a bit a few minutes ago, but I think after getting on the shelf, getting some market feedback, you guys did a packaging refresh. You felt like that was needed. Maybe just expand on that a little bit in terms of kind of like the why behind that, and just maybe like, looking back, if you had done some things differently, things a chance you kind of would have got it right the first time, and what would that have looked like?
So what we did specifically starts with our soccer jersey. About a year ago, we had a conversation, Ricardo and I was telling him, look, I'm going to retailers. Some of them, their lighting is not great. We need to figure it out. Like since the beginning, since day one, we've known that green is our color, right? Like you have to, in our opinion, marry to a color. So if I ask you what color is Bud Light, what color is Budweiser, you're going to know the answer. And if you can do that and own a color, then you're onto something. In our case, we knew green was that, but I don't think we were giving green a chance to really stand out. And I think that triggered a thought, what with some of the designers. And then the first put into practice that we had with it was for a soccer jersey that he had been designing. He just wanted to do a drop and give it to certain people, and we sold it actually. So we did 100 people pre-order. You had to get on the list to even get it, and it just looked really well. It made the green stand out while serving as a contrast and really feeling just as a complementary color that would work. Because before we had used like cream or white, which were good, but almost like too soft for the brand that we were trying to build.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got out and we just got a lot of recognition. Soccer Bible posted about our jersey and like how it spoke to Latin heritage, and it just got picked up by people that we would have never imagined would get picked up. and we saw the jersey out there, then we said, okay, cool, maybe this would work in retail. And we talked to Lauren, our partner for the CPG side of design, and we said, hey, can you put this into practice? So we went back and forth for 3 months on how this could potentially look like, and we ended up with the pink as the background, green as the center, and took inspiration from other brands like Barrow on how they split their can. And
Mhm.
we did something similar with a little twist, and it worked out pretty well. So now, you really can't miss Casalú on the shelf, and you can't miss what it is.
Totally. Yeah, looks great.
Because it happened to me once that I was at a store and a lady picks up the long drink, and I'll tell you to the long drink guys, but turns it around, looks at it, cools, puts it back, the blue box, and goes to the cashier. And he said, hey, I'm looking for a gin RTD. And I was like, what? And then the guy gave her Tanqueray. And I was like, you had it in your hand. And I saw this happen in front of me.
That's so wild.
So I was like, oh my God, like we need to call out rum somewhere.
Right.
'Cause, I mean, maybe not, right? Like at the end of the day, you just want the brand to be the brand. But I literally had this conversation also with Brad over at Beatbox. Same thing. So it's like the consumer just wants simplicity and get to the point really quickly. I think that's the other challenge when we're building a brand. Like, it's important to build this whole world, but I think for us in our category specifically, where it's not a bottle that you read over 10 minutes, you need to get to a point really quickly, like if you were doing um you know a water or a juice. So it's kind of weird because it plays in these two worlds of liquor and almost like a soda.
Right. Totally.
And I think to do it differently in the beginning, I think we tried to do it in the beginning. I think if you have the cash, go with someone who's built brands that have been successful on the shelf. I have no shame on saying that because it's not about it being pretty, it's about it getting the job done. And we were not great at that. We really wanted something that where it was attached to the brand, but eventually you need to get to something that a design that communicates not only that pops on the shelf, but one that communicates what you're doing. Look at a brand like Carbless, simple. Maybe you're not a big fan of their design, but they're selling a lot. And it's not only flavor, they know how to find it, they know what it is. And that is also important. If you can find both, and depends on the brand you're trying to build, I think that's key. And the earlier you do it, the better. So for us, if I went back in time, I would, with all respect, obviously, to our partner in the CPG side of design, I would go to a larger, more established company that could deliver a design that could win on the shelf.
Totally. Yeah, those are all really great points. More recently, you guys launched this 4 flavor variety pack. I think you mentioned to me like you thought this really was going to be this SKU is really kind of going to be a tipping point for the brand. Tell me a bit about that and how it's been
Yeah.
going so far.
Proving to be. I think, we look back at it, hindsight 2020. Obviously, we approached the market a bit different, started with one flavor, and we've always been confident about what we've built, but the taste profile, I think, for the initial audience that we were going into versus the one that was more educated on the hard seltzer market, those were just different. So we needed to really create a variety of flavors where you could take a drink home, a brand that you love, and share it with people you love, and that everybody would say it wasn't about I like it or I don't like it. It was about which one do I like. And that's a massive shift that I think is very particular to our category. Because if I was doing beer, I've always said I would just do a 12 pack of limon. That's my favorite flavor, and then I'll be good. It doesn't apply, I think, in RTD space right now. So we thought about what are Latinos drinking, and what flavors do they like, and how do we marry the concept of Casalú with some of those flavors that we feel are authentic to the palate of our consumers. So if you look at the lineup, you got the lemon lime, which is limon. So it's a graduation of that rum and Coke, right? Getting the Coke replaced by something that's light, like sparkling water. So that's our base. But then we have 3 flavors. Mandarina, which is tangerine, very common. If you look at Jarritos, Fanta, like those are core aspects of something that's drank all across South America in different ways. And we want to make sure we have one of those, mainly as a replacement to passion fruit in the short term. We have a Moscow Mule, which is a mule flavor. And the reason we call it Moscow Mule instead of Rum Mule, we tried that to Bad Bunny's opening song in Verano Sin Ti, which is his most successful album, but partly because it's a drink that it's very famous and has gone a ton in Latin America. And then we have peach tea. And the reason we put a peach tea in there, we There's a brand called Nestle, but we drank a lot of it back at home in Venezuela, and we were seeing our audience really just gravitate towards that flavor profile. And we've always said there's lemon or lime tea, and then there's peach tea in our culture. And for some reason, the people who are attached to peach tea, they take it very, very seriously. So we decided on that one, and man, it's just like the response is insane. It's
That's awesome.
insane. I think it's like, we would get stuff like, you guys have built the coolest brand. We love your brand. We want to work with you guys, but I don't like your liquid. And that was very tough to hear as a founder. And you have to decide, do you keep doing it, or do you change, or do you find somewhere in the middle? And I think what we realized was there are things that we like in our culture that could definitely be part of Casalú. Let's just bring it in. And the shift in just 3 weeks has been massive,
That's awesome.
and we're very happy about what it's generating. And yeah, I think if we hadn't done that, maybe the brand dies. But now that we've done it, I think it's the key to the success. It all starts with product
Totally.
and the context for the product.
Love that. Well, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you guys are kind of ending the year on a high note. You guys are probably in, definitely some level of deep 2026 planning mode. You guys did hit all your goals next year. What does the business roughly look like by the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, for next year, I think a deeper expansion within Florida, and we've signed expansions as well in the state of Georgia and North Carolina. I think we'll 10x where we're selling right now, and yeah, now it's putting fuel in the tank and growing. I think the expansion that we're going to see in Florida next year is going to be very powerful, and we're going to go deeper and deeper into the market. Right now, we have only 300 points of distribution. I think we can hit just in Florida, we can hit 3,000 next year. That's without counting what we're doing in Georgia.
That's great. I'm definitely rooting for you guys. This has been awesome, Gabriel. Really appreciate the time. So many great insights here. Yeah, what's the best place for people to follow along with you specifically, and then best place for people to follow along with the brand these days?
Yeah. So for me, just look me up on LinkedIn. If you put in Casalú, probably I'll show up, and let's connect there. That's where I spend a lot of time, whether it's sometimes sharing something and most times just doom scrolling and connecting with amazing people. So please connect. Let's talk. And if you care about Latino culture, then let's chat. And for the brand, Instagram is the place to be for us, because how we approach content.
Yep.
It's at drink Casalú, Casalu. Give us a follow, check what we're doing, and hopefully I'm sure it'll resonate.
Yeah, awesome. Well, appreciate the time, Gabriel. It's been awesome. I think that's the pod.